Good morning. This is Brett Rushing from the Institute of Texan Cultures. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Dick Connors. It is the 21st of June, 2011. Also in the room with us, would you please introduce yourselves and say if I have permission to record in your presence?
I'm Mary Kate Carter, and you may.
This is Andrew Caruncle, and you do have permission to record this.
Mr. Connors, do I have your permission to record?
Indeed you do.
Very, very good. We have done an interview before.
Correct.
Where we started just basically talking about your life, your bio, military career, and you said that there were some things that you felt were important to add.
Yes.
Can you explain?
Like flying.
Like flying? Which was a large part of your life.
It
Yeah.
sure was.
Where would you like to begin, sir?
Begin at the beginning.
Okay.
I was born in September 1936, a little town called Logansport, which is about an hour north of Indianapolis. Lafayette, Kokomo, Piru, all those kinds of hick towns. And it was a great time to be a kid. Mom and Dad didn't worry about you. You had to take your baseball glove and go down to the park, scratch up a little softball game. Softball, by the way, should be the national pastime instead of hardball. A lot more action, just a lot more. But anyway, I was 9 years old when World War II ended. And for those who weren't there, there was a false alarm about Japan surrendering. About 2 days before they actually did surrender and do the signing and all that sort of thing. And boy, all the buses were loaded with people waving flags out the windows. I was in there. I don't know what the heck was going on, but I had a heck of a time. Got out of school. But it was a good time. And my teachers really got after me because I could not stop doing little Stukas and Zeros and P-51 Mustangs on the corners of my papers that I had to turn in. They didn't appreciate that very much, but I couldn't stop. Made little models, hung them for the ceiling. My mother gave me the Dickens, but they stayed. Then high school. Guys wore jeans, short sleeve shirts, crew cuts. Girls wore bobby socks, saddle shoes, long skirts billowing out, blouses from here, from the wrist up to the neck, completely buttoned. They had names like Barbara and Susan, and there was a very limited. They didn't make up names in those days, and I'm not saying these are worse days, but I thought those were better, good days. And I worked all the way through high school, different things, carrying golf clubs for guys and working as AC Pennies, pumping gas, washing cars. I'll tell you a story. 1950, let's see, I graduated in 50, must have been 53. I was working in a gas station in the summer and doing lubes, oil changes, and pumping gas and all that stuff. And in comes this pretty new, I think it was either a Cadillac or an Oldsmobile. Put it up on the rack and looking around under there, I found the gizmo, the nut to drain the oil, and I'm looking around, and here's this can hanging down. I didn't know what it was. So I thought I better know, and so I called the boss in. He took a look. He says, I think that's an oil filter. We didn't have oil filters till about then. I had a 36 Chevy. You just drove it until the oil looked like tar. You dumped it out in your dad's in the back alley, on the ground, and fill it up again. And that was interesting. So in 1954, as I've said before, my dad knew I wasn't going to amount to spit hanging around Logansport. There wasn't that much to do. The jobs were. I could tell you something about my dad. I wanted to say it last time. He was the president of the local AF&M machinists. That's what we had in that time. We had three little machine companies. The one my dad worked for did mostly hydraulic systems for fire trucks. Well, the management put up on the bulletin board that they are probably going to have to get rid of some people because they just weren't getting the orders. And they could come back, but they're probably going to have to lay off some people. So Dad called a meeting. It was all 50 of them, I guess it was. And his opinion was that they could go to management and offer to reduce hours for everybody. So nobody got laid off. And it worked. They went for it. What do you think today's unions would do? All you got to do is read the papers. Not against unions, but they've really got the bit in their teeth these days. And it's going to hurt them in the long run. So, I think I told you before, Dad called these recruiters in. There were two of them, really. One was Navy, Air Force, and one was Army. As I said before, the Army guy, all he could talk about was drill and ceremonies and carrying a rifle and going out on the range and learning how to use a bayonet and all that stuff. The other guy was talking tech schools. I said, that's for me. So I did. And so it was kind of funny. We went, all of us had to go down to Indianapolis to be sworn in. And we're sitting out in a corridor like this, you know, with our feet out, people walking around. And we go in there and, you know, swear allegiance and all that sort of thing. Came back out, sat in the same corridor with feet out there, and the sergeant came through and he kicked my feet. I thought he was going to break my ankles. Get them goddamn feet out of the way, you know. And I knew I'd changed courses, shall we say. Went to Sampson Air Force Base, which is near Syracuse. Cold, really cold. It was a pre-World War II cantonment base.
I don't know what that means.
It means all wood, no insulation, coal furnace if you had one. Everything was wood. Huge drill fields. There were about 8 of them. And right on one of the Finger Lakes that froze that thick while I was there. That was boot camp. And everybody knows what boot camp is. One of the big thrills is going in the gas chamber with your gas mask in your hand and having to sing a song or something before you can put your mask on. Put it on and clear it, you know, blow all the, oh man, would come out of their eyes, just streaming water, couldn't hardly breathe, couldn't hardly talk. And it was quite an interesting place to go. And you remember Quemoy and Matsu and Formosa?
Mm-hmm.
It was right at that time. Looked like Formosa was going to go to war with China or vice versa. And this guy with 2 stripes, boy, 2 stripes by that time, you know, kowtow, you know, comes in and says, okay, you're on alert to go to Formosa, a whole bunch of us. And wow, pack up, get ready to go. Well, we did. Our tactical instructor came in about an hour and a half later. And here we're all standing around with our duffel bags full and ready to go. And he says, what in the, what's going on? And we told him he couldn't cover it up. He just, like you. And so we didn't have to go to Formosa after all. Did get to go to Keesler Air Force Base for tech school. Airborne radio repairman. I had a 6-month stop after school, a 6-month stop at a SAC base in Missouri. That wasn't much fun either, but I did meet my wife. And I got orders to go to the Philippines. And we were engaged to be engaged. I called her, I said, I got these orders, I got to go. I said, will you wait for me? And she says, no. It's now or never, buddy. So I got a little leave, got my dad's permission to get married because I was underage. She was older than me, didn't need anybody's permission. Got married, had about 5 days. She stayed there with my parents, lived with them while I went to the Philippines. Finally I found an off-base housing that I could rent, and so she got to come over. Now, I flew Air Force aircraft to the Philippines. We got to Hawaii and the whole thing broke down. We were there for 5 or 6 days for repairs. I couldn't get off the Hickam field. Couldn't leave the field. In fact, we really weren't supposed to leave the barracks except for meals, because at any moment they could come get you and off you have to go again. She, on the other hand, got to go to San Francisco, get on the General Daniel Sultan, which is a World War II supply ship that had been converted into passengers and things. Got to go to Hawaii, got to tour, they had a bus tour, they went everywhere, Arizona, on and on and on and on. She got to go through the crossing of the equator thing they do, you know, with the costumes and pitchfork stuff, tridents, I think they call them, the whole thing. She had a blast.
The Neptune ceremony.
Yeah, the Neptune ceremony. She had a good time. So that's good, because Philippines wasn't all that much fun, but it was okay.
Where in the Philippines were you stationed?
At Clark Air Force Base.
Clark.
Yeah. I was a radio repairman in the 26th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, which was Sabre jets. Super Sabres, they call them, because they'd added a radome on the nose for whatever target sighting, and instead of machine guns, they had rockets. Big old rocket pod that would drop down. They had about 15 or 20 rockets in the thing. And it was a good tour, good duty. And toward the end, I think I had about a month to go, an F-100 squadron came in. They were going to replace the 26th because they had F-100s, and I don't know what the heck was going to happen with the 26th. Well, they hadn't brought their ground crews with them. They just flew in, and the ground crews were following. And one of the pilots said that his intercom was out. Not intercom, but they were single seat, but it was a headset. So I went out there, and always behind the seat there was this can that you plug your headset into, and there it was. Popped the top off, expecting to see wires and resistors, things like that. I see this little plastic thing sticking up. That's all it was, just a little piece of plastic, smaller than a postage stamp. Started pulling on it, and came out and had two thin little wires on it. I said, "What is this?" So I took it back to our shop, to the boss, sergeant, and I said, "Well, what is this?" He says, "I think that's something called a transistor." We couldn't do it. We couldn't do anything with it. Just had to tell them, "Look, you're going to have to wait for your guys to get here with their supplies and stuff, because we don't have any transistors. I don't know how to troubleshoot a transistor." Although that was interesting. So, got out, went home to Indiana, and went to Purdue in Lafayette, Indiana, West Lafayette, Indiana. Took the biological sciences and chemistry program, and did well. But the only jobs I had offered to me were Eli Lilly in quality control. Looking at pills and testing. I don't know what the heck that would be, but I wasn't going to pay much. Well, I'd taken the last 2 years of Air Force ROTC and got my commission as a regular Air Force. And but I didn't have to go on active duty, and if I didn't want to. So I said, let's go on active duty. Problem was that I was still on the books as being an airman, an enlisted guy. And that wasn't going to end till fall. So here I am with little gold bars and everything, but still on the government books, I'm still an airman. So I went to Fort Wayne, and another reason I kind of dislike unions. Paid big bucks to join the union up there and go to work for International Harvester, big trucks and stuff, for the summer. And 5 days after I started working there, they went on strike. They went on strike the whole summer. We went broke. I mean, we had our own mobile home, and just stuck in Fort Wayne for the rest of the summer. I didn't have any options, so we were pretty doggone close to being broke. Then my wife really wanted a family. I mean, she wanted a big family. We had 2 girls, and she wanted a boy so bad. So we got down to Eglin Air Force Base. That's where I was assigned, and she was due. I mean, day or two away from producing. And I took her to the hospital there. Checked her in at, what would that be, obstetrics. And the lady, well, how far along are you? And she says, well, I think I'm due right now or maybe tomorrow. Whoa! They took her in, gave her a bed, waited one day, I think it was, and she produced my son. And so she was happy then. She'd had 2 girls. She wanted a boy. I guess we'd have had 8 kids before to get that boy. So we were there till 64. And my job, as I told you before, was paper pushing. It was called biological and chemical weapons, and I was supposedly in charge of all the ranch hand stuff, the defoliant programs. What we were doing basically was upgrading what was already being used in Vietnam and elsewhere. It wasn't just used in Vietnam, by the way. It was used lots of places. And so I took flight exam, physical, eyes and everything, passed. Made application for flight school. Helicopters. I wanted to fly helicopters. That's all I wanted. I wasn't interested in flying anything that could go that fast. You know, I just didn't think I had that. I don't think I could handle that. Got a call, said, you're too old. I said, well, I just want to fly. You've had, in the Air Force, I don't care what you want to fly. If you want to fly helicopters, that's fine. But you have to go through the whole flight program and then ask for helicopters or submarines or whatever it is you want to do. I was too old. So as I said in an earlier interview, I scouted around and found out there was a colonel up at Fort Rucker, which was only about a 2-hour drive north of us, who was a flight surgeon for the Army. The flight surgeon, the only one. And I called and asked him if I could come up and chat with him. I did. I took along my physical reports and, for the test, and I asked him about the possibility of transferring to the Army Medical Service Corps and going to flight school. He said, I don't see any reason why you couldn't. He said, you met the physical requirements, and but he said, I got to warn you, Vietnam is really gearing up. We're starting to put a lot of medical evacuation air ambulance units into Vietnam. We only had 1 or 2 small detachments at first. And they're going to go. And they're probably going to go more than once, 2 or 3 times perhaps. Okay. Okay with me. So I went out and got myself a green uniform, good looking hat and everything, and hung all my stuff on it. And oh boy, the guy that ran the organization down at Eglin, he was steamed. He did everything he could to stop me. He couldn't stop me. But boy, he sure tried. Said I was, essential. I was an essential member of his command. Well, I wasn't. I was first lieutenant pushing papers. So up I went. This guy was Colonel Spurgeon Neal. Next time I saw him, he was Major General, by the way. You saw that picture of me getting the Purple Heart and everything. I was his adjutant for just a few months until my class started, and I joined my class. Now, let me tell you something about the classes. You have two types of aviators in the Army, warrant officers and officers. Warrant officers, if I had it all to do over again, I think I'd been a warrant officer, because their entire duty is flying, but they can fly as long as they're able. They don't get to command anything, but they are the backbone of Army aviation to this day. And officers, on the other hand, by the time you get to be a major, that's pretty much it. You're probably not going to do any more flying. So for me, that would have been like 4 years, 5 years. But okay, so that's the way it worked. We were separate. We never saw these guys. They were at Fort Rucker just like we were, but we had a separate class, separate schedules. We flew did our instrument training or whatever it was we were doing. And then we went home, had supper, went to the movies, all that. These guys had to GI the barracks, fall out for inspections, and it was 24 hours a day for those guys. I had a lot of respect for them too. And anyway, I flew I brought some pictures here just for your edification. You ever heard of you ever see a movie called MASH? Well, you might have seen a helicopter, just a little bubble with a skeleton tail. That's the H-13 Bell helicopter. Bell helicopter uses the same rotor system and drive system and everything in everything they build, starting with this little baby. It only had single controls, no two pilots, one pilot. You could put a leader on each side and fly them in, and they were slow. And they were, I won't say they were underpowered, but if you had an engine failure, you knew you were going to be able to get that on the ground because it just fluttered like a butterfly. It was a really, really reliable aircraft. Now this is the one that we flew in primary helicopter school. It's the H-23 Raven, and it was a piece of junk. And what really ticked me off was that 99% of the instructors didn't insist on you learning how to hover before you did anything else. They would do the hovering. You went out with an instructor. They'd hover it out to the pad, out to the takeoff pad. And then he'd get it going, and then he'd say, okay, you got it. And if you went, you did banks and turns and anything he wanted you to do. My guy insisted that I hover. I mean, I really had a tough time with that. Nobody else had to do that, just me. And I think I told you I got boarded, sent to a progress board, or whatever they called it. And he's heard this before, but the guy, they heard me out and told me what the problem seemed to be. And I said, well, my mother told me I didn't start walking until I was 4 years old. So I figured it's going to take me a little bit longer to get the hang of this. Boy, they were roaring. Guy came out and he said, okay, you got 10 more hours. That's all it took, with a different instructor. And of course, I couldn't join up with my previous crew. I had to come along in a second class behind them, which was okay. And we got there, we started flying the H-19. This is the H-19 Chickasaw. It's a Sikorsky. And I was really ticked off because the later class, a couple of classes were already flying Hueys, UH-1As and Bs. I'm looking up there at the beautiful Hueys. I'm down here flying this Korean War vintage thing. But well, I'll get to that later. It was a heck of a plane. It had fore and aft tanks, gas tanks, and you had a switch. You had to keep an eye on your balance, on your trim. If you start sagging down like that, then you knew that, switch tanks, use that other tank for a while. A friend of mine went out on a night flight during flight school in one of these things. He thought he was switching tanks, but what he did was switch it off. Fortunately, he was up about 3,000, I guess. And he had enough presence of mind to know what had happened. So he put it in a nice, it auto-rotated really nicely. He put it in auto-rotation, switched to the aft tank or the fore tank, and got it started again. Now this is at night, pitch dark in Alabama. I mean, there's nothing around. No street lights or anything like that. And he did it. Presence of mind, I liked it. It had a really bad habit, though. You notice that there are 4 wheels? Okay. Hueys are in this and that. They're skids. Skid mounted. You're always going to come down level on those skids. This thing would get into something called ground resonance, which means if you were taxiing out to the takeoff pad and you pulled up the pitch it a little bit, kind of lightened it so you could move faster, all of a sudden it would go boom, boom, and you didn't want that third bump because it would just fall apart. It would immediately go into a horrible. I've seen the results of it. It just fall apart, shake itself to death, and you couldn't do anything about it once it got into it. I got into it once. I had enough sense by then to yank it up off the ground, and then because what I was doing was taxing, and I was wanting to taxi a little faster, so I kind of pulled in a little pitch, so it lifted up a little bit. Bonk, bonk. I went about 15 feet in the air in a hurry. It was a good aircraft, and one of the things I noticed, I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit because these things relate to one another. With this aircraft, you had to be very, very, very light on the controls. It was not underpowered, but it had a big old recip, 12-cylinder radial engine, very similar to what you'd see in a B-17. And it had a lot of power, but it was also very heavy. And you would lose lift anytime you made an unnecessary correction to your controls, whether it was pitch or cyclic. Cyclic is this part. The collective is this part. Now let me get to that. Let me talk about that for a minute. Forgot about that one. All helicopters are the same way. At least as far as I know, they're still the same way. You have a one control that tilts the rotors this way, this way, this way. You have a tail rotor. You have pedals down here. And you can control, you can't control the pitch, you can control the pitch on the tail rotor with those pedals. That's how you, if you go down on the collective, let's say you're going to land, then you come down with your right foot. Keep it in trim, otherwise you're coming in like this or like this. And then you have a cyclic, which is this part, that gives tilt to the main rotor. That's all it does. Down here you got something called a collective, which has a throttle and this action. And what you're doing there is changing the pitch on those rotors. Make sense? So if you're going to if you're going to pick up a lot of speed, you're going 60 knots, you want to go 90 knots. You pull in power, move the cyclic forward. That way you can maintain your altitude and increase your airspeed at the same time. Otherwise, you're going to get speed all right, but you're going to be going down, or maybe up. You don't want to do either one of those. You want to keep going. And that's fundamentals of flying a helicopter. It's just, and at first, God Almighty, it seems like you're never going to learn that. Oh yeah, I got to do this first and then that. And after a while, you don't even think about it. You just do it. And that's interesting. I think that even a dummy like me could just do it. So anyway, when I got to Vietnam, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, I had learned an awful lot about not making big moves with the controls. Go easy, because you can lose lift. You're going to lose lift in any helicopter if you jerk it around a lot, horse it around. I started flying with these young guys, some with me anyway, that had flown nothing but the Huey. They were the ones that got to fly the Huey in flight school. And we were flying D models, which were not underpowered, but we were in a high altitude area. Density altitude was pretty high. And man, these guys were just jerking that thing around. I said, look, every time you do that, you're losing lift, and we can't afford to lose lift. So just calm down on the controls. Don't be, just think about what you're going to do and do it gradually, gently. Don't be doing this stuff. And I gave a good exhibition of that one night. I don't think I told you this one. I had one of these guys with me, a young warrant officer in the right seat. I was in the left seat. We went in to pick up the casualties this way, and we got shot at from both sides. And this was late at night. And when we picked them up, here's these huge trees. In Vietnam, some of those trees were really big, and they were close together. And I told the crew and this guy, so that we're not going back that way. I picked up, didn't get too many, there were three casualties that we picked up. I said, now we're going to go up and over those trees. So I sucked that collective up underneath my armpit. and didn't move that 1 inch. Nothing. Nada. Boy, we're going up, and all of a sudden, beep, 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 beep. You know, the rotor RPM's falling off, and the guy said, oh, ah. I said, hold on, and I just started what you call milking it, doing this, just bringing back the RPMs a little bit, smoothing it a little bit, but it still hadn't moved that at all, or the pedals. And sure enough, the beep, beep, beep went out. We had, you know, we still didn't have full RPMs on the rotors, but we were getting there. Get up over the last tree and just start easing it forward, just real slow. Now, you know, this is combat area. You know, you kind of want to get the hell out of there as fast as you can, but we did it. And I said, now that's what I mean. You know, you can get out of anything and get into just about anything and get out of it if you'll just not get sloppy with the controls. Don't lose lift. Don't mess around. The aircraft will do it for you. But you got to know how to work it. So that's another story. That's the kind of stuff I wanted to talk about before.
Absolutely.
Now this is an H-34. It's a cargo helicopter, CH-34. Everything else we had was, we were referring to, were either observation helicopters or utility helicopters. The Huey is a utility helicopter, UH-1A, B, C, D, E. This is a cargo helicopter. You see what it's got back here?
Rear wheel.
Yeah, tail wheel. Sikorsky likes to make them that way, and that's what they're flying. These Black Hawks, those are Sikorskys. You ever seen on TV where they're trying to put those things down? The tail wheel has to be goes first. Now it's okay if you're on a flight line or something, you can put it down. But these guys coming in on all kinds of terrain, and I don't like them. You've got to plant that tail wheel, and then you can come down onto your main gear. I haven't heard of anybody getting in trouble with it, but I never did like them. I flew them at our crash rescue unit at Rucker while I was waiting to go to Vietnam the first time, and I could not really get excited about that thing. Okay, so I reported into the 498th Medical Company in Vietnam in 66. And they've been there for a year, and they're still intense, you know, and getting their supplies from everybody all over the place, other people's mess halls. They hadn't been able to set anything up. And I sat around for a couple of days waiting for them to tell me where I was going to go, because in a company, you have, you send each platoon, which is 12 helicopters, 6 helicopters, 12 pilots, a bunch of medics, crew chiefs, support personnel. That's a platoon, and they're deployable. They can go anywhere they have to go. They're self-sufficient. On the other hand, they don't have a mess hall and things like that, but, you know, they usually are cohabiting with other units that do. And you don't just support whatever unit is there. You support anything that comes through. I don't care who they are. That's area support. I was sent to the 2nd platoon in Pleiku. Our area was from An Khe, which is darn near to the China Sea.
Well, yeah.
Clear over to the Cambodian border, and then from Bami to it, way up north to Dak Pek. Now that's, if you were paying attention at the time, that's a pretty bad area. A lot of mountains, things like that, but it's alluvial. All of a sudden, here's the Iadrang River, and you've heard of the Iadrang dust-up that Cav had when they first got there. And then it's alluvial, it just slopes off all the way down to the big toe at the end of Vietnam. It's an interesting country. And anything that came through there, we went out on the Koreans. By the way, a lot of people don't know this. You may not know it. You know how we got into Vietnam in the first place? You ever heard of SEATO? Southeast Asia Treaty Organization.
French.
Vietnam, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and us. That's how we got in. That was part of the deal with SEATO. If Vietnam or Australia or anybody else was having problems, you were obliged to help them out militarily and with supplies, logistics, and everything. That's how we got in. We didn't just decide to go in there and start killing people. You know. And it started out very small, you know. We had advisories. That's it. That's what we had, was advisors to the Vietnamese Army and Air Force. And then by the time I got there, of course, it considerably enlarged. In fact, I got there just 3 months after the first CAV deployed in Vietnam. And the guys that I flew with that had been there a while said that, man, that Ia Drang deal was really bad news. I mean, they were out there backhauling patients for days, and all kinds of Vietnamese too, Viet Cong even. So that was the difference. Now the Air Cav, first Air Cav, had their own medical air evacuation. They called it medevac. Solely theirs. We didn't. They took them with them, and they didn't rely on us, except for backhauling. If they really got into it, we could go out and pick up patients at their clearing stations and haul them back to a hospital, and we did that a lot. They had it rough. Those guys were playing cowboys and Indians the whole time they were there. I mean, I'll get to that later. We had it pretty good. Those guys roughed it. I mean, tents, sleeping bags for a year, you know, eating K rations, C rations, hot meal maybe once a week, something like that. And those are the pilots, you know. I got a little story to tell about that later. Anyway, I joined the 498th. Colonel Medrano was the CO, and he called me in. I'd been there about 3 or 4 days waiting to be assigned. He said, "You're going to go to the 2nd Platoon." Sir? He says, "Now, clean your own weapon." Now, this guy's an Indian, pure Indian from Oklahoma. I said, "Yes, sir." Well, I had no clue as to why he said that. Well, he's here in San Antonio, and we have a little get-together over the old, new Earl Abel's way out on Broadway. The other day, I was out there. I'm going tomorrow, too. I said, "Colonel Medrano," I said, "why did you tell me to clean my own weapon?" He said, "Oh, well, because you were going up to the 2nd Platoon that had a brand new platoon leader because I had fired the previous one." So that was kind of a warning, I guess, that I needed to really look out for myself,
Right.
And that sort of thing. Anyway, I went up there, and by that time, the platoon leader was a guy that's a really nice guy, Lou Mizell. They didn't know how old I was. They thought I was like 24, 25. I was 30. And Lou Mizell was only 2 years older than me. But, I got the kid treatment for a while until a couple of them found out how old I was. You know, had kids and everything else. He was a great guy. And but he was on pins and needles because the guy before him had been fired, and Lou knew he was going to have to tighten up the controls a little bit, and he did. And some of the guys resented that very much. Other guys applauded it. It had to be done. So I got there kind of a hinky. Well, since I was a new guy, I got to fly with him a lot. Because I didn't know what had gone on before and all that sort of thing. And learned a lot from him. And we became pretty good friends. In fact, I'm still in contact with him from time to time. And the tour was very interesting. Like I said, we had anything that came through, anything that happened that needed medical evacuation, we did it. Well, along the same lines though, we had one of the first American helicopter, not Air Cav, but a regular infantry division moving in, the 25th Infantry. We got one brigade, the 3rd of the 25th, and they set up base camp about 40 miles west of us. And they had to be covered at all times. That meant we had to put somebody out there on standby, and that started happening a lot more. We wound up pulling 8 to 10 day standbys out. Well, it wasn't bad. They had good food and everything. Got a little tiresome though, getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning and running out and getting somebody, or didn't get a whole lot of sleep. And that happened a lot more frequently from then on. And that was pretty much standard practice, was having field standbys. Because you didn't have time to wind up where you were, get cranking and get way up there to pick up a guy. You had to have people out there to get them.
May I ask you what year that would have been?
Well, actually, it was both tours. The first tour, the one I'm talking about now, was I got there in early '66 and left in '67, late '67. And there really wasn't that much going on. But there again, you never knew. And everything's sailing along nice and calm, and all of a sudden, bang, stuff hits the fan, and you're busy for quite a long time. And just about everything that I'd ever learned in flight school came in very, very useful, especially weather. We got a pretty good dose of instrument training. And over there, now down the Delta it wasn't so bad, but up in the hills and the mountains, you'd go out, the moon's out and everything's hunky-dory, and you pick up the casualty, you start coming back, and all of a sudden there's fog. Just total no visibility whatsoever, so you had to go on the instruments. Well, none of us were really instrument rated, but we all had the fundamentals. Mainly just stay on heading and call the Air Force Base and ask them if their GCA is working and can they get me in. And that's how you got in most of the time. They get on the GCA, they bring you in, and then you had to worry about how you're going to hover around. And I mean, the fog sometimes is so thick that even after you got down on the runway, you really couldn't see. They'd send out a follow me truck. Where'd he go? So, and many's the time I had to actually park the thing on the Air Force tarmac, because I couldn't get back over to Camp Holloway, which is where we were stationed, just across the valley. You couldn't make it. So I'd call over there and I'd say, hey, I'm parking it here for a while until it clears up. Okay, we'll alert somebody else. Always had to have somebody there on standby. There wasn't anything really momentous that I can think of, except that I got the starch taken out of my neck. I mean, I thought I was pretty hot stuff. We had spent, first 3 months I was there, we spent just hauling ARVN, Army, Republic of Vietnam soldiers, things like that. No Americans, except once or twice there was an advisor that got winged or something. Then the 25th moved in, and then one of the first things they did was go out on a operation. And I got kind of hardened. I was a tough old guy, and all of a sudden, these wounded guys don't bother me. And so we went in and picked up a few of these American soldiers, and we were not being shot at or anything. I was kind of glanced around, and this guy is laying on the litter just looking right at me. Did I tell you this before?
A little bit.
Sicati was one of our medics, Harold Sicati, really good guy. I said, Scotty, what's the matter with that guy? He looks like he's in pretty good shape. About that time, we were on uneven ground, and the helicopter kind of bobbled a little bit like that. His head flopped over, and there was no back to his head. Why his eyes were staring at me like that, I don't know. But I tell you, I ate a lot of crow internally from that experience. I never was cocky again, especially when it happened to me. That's another story. Anyway, it was a rather uneventful tour. We had the highs and lows, a little bit of excitement. I went into a lot of that, I think, on the slide of my last interview. So I went back to the States and to Fort Sam here for the officer's career course. That was a 6-month course. Then I was assigned to the 507th Air Ambulance Company, which was an ambulance company in name only. They had no mission. Mainly what it was we had about 4 or 5 of these old babies, the old H-19, and 1 Huey. Hueys were all in Vietnam.
Okay.
If you were in an air ambulance unit in the States, you were flying something like that. You weren't flying Hueys. We had 1 Huey for the old man. Nobody got to fly that but him. And so that was kind of a bummer. So I signed up for applied for the actual instrument course at Fort Rucker. And that's what I did. Took the instrument course. And a little family story here. I was almost finished. I'd been co-renting a mobile home with a warrant officer who was also in the instrument. The instrument course, you didn't go through as a class. You went through as individuals. You know, we did the link trainer and all that, and then you went out and you flew a lot of weather. And it was 3rd of July. Rain, cats, and dogs. Knock, knock, knock. Open the door. Here's a cop. Are you Captain Connors? Yes, sir. He says, well, your wife has had an accident. I said, where? What do you mean she had an accident? And in Opp, Alabama. OPP. Mark that down, boy. That's a really thriving little community. Turns out that she was going to surprise me. And we had a Volkswagen bus. You know, remember those? And she piled the kids and the dog in there. Didn't call me, didn't let me know she was coming. And so here's this cop. She claimed that she'd hit a tree. The cops said there wasn't a tree there or anything. They figured she just saw something and hit the brakes, and it had been raining like crazy. Anyway, the thing, she got down into this side, on her side in this bus. Nobody was hurt. And so I went out there, and the bus was dented up a good bit. All piled. I'd bought a little bitty Mercedes diesel. It was a taxi cab. That's what they were. And, early on, the Mercedes diesels were in much demand as taxis in Europe. So I had one. So we all piled in that. The young warrant officer knew that this was coming. He bailed out. He said, I know you got your family. So he says, I got no problem with me. I got a buddy. I can go over to the BOQ and bunk with him. Because we only had going to be there about another 4 or 5 days. But she insisted forever that somebody pulled a trick on her, that there was a tree there, and she swerved to avoid that tree, and then they got rid of the tree so she wouldn't be able to sue anybody or something. I don't know what it was. But anyway, we member of USA, and boy, they got right with it and fixed all the dents and replaced everything that was damaged, and we had the car back, the Volkswagen bus back. So I was determined to tow my little Mercedes back with me. We had a little dog, a little Shetland sheepdog. Well, she loved to ride in the car, but she wouldn't shut up. She was barking, forever barking, jumping over the seats, and just having a good time. So we put her back there in that Mercedes. And driving along for hours and hours and hours, pulled in to get some gas, and this guy came up and he says, is that your Mercedes? Is that your car? I said, yeah. He says, I thought that dog was driving that car. She was up there with her paws on the steering wheel, barking and barking, trying to pass. He was hilarious. He said, man, I never saw anything like that in my life. He thought that.
That's good.
Oh, yeah. She was something else. She would chase birds in the sky crossing over our backyard.
Territory.
Yeah, territorial. So, I finished that instrument course, and by that time I was ready to go back. So, we bought a house we'd been living in post quarters at Fort Sam. She wasn't going to be able to stay there once I'm gone. Bought a little house there outside the post. And I left. That was 68. And I had you've heard this before, but I'll repeat it anyway. I was on orders for a particular unit, 283rd Medical Detachment, which was very unusual. Usually you got just orders to go to Vietnam and show up at the hospital or someplace and be assigned somewhere. I had orders for a specific unit, and as a matter of fact, it was where I had been the first tour, Pleiku. All they did was pull out the platoon and put in a detachment. And that's what I had orders for. And Colonel Howlett was running the 498th, and I had to go through the 498th because he was going to do the assigning. And I had orders for the 498th. And he called me in his office and said, I'm going to keep you here. You're going to be my supply officer, one of many. And I didn't want to be a supply officer, but I was nice about it. I said, sir, I'm on orders for the 283rd. He said, I know that, but I can change your orders. I have that authority. I said, yes, sir, I know you can. I said, but I know the territory. I know the weather. I know everything. Second day I'm there, I'll be flying. You know, and I'd like to go there instead of being your supply officer. And he said, no, you're going to stay here and be my supply officer. Yes, sir. Now, Colonel Howlett's one of them that I did an interview with here about 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Yeah, Byron Howlett. I think he'd forgotten about all that. I hope so. Anyway, we got along really well. Paul Bloomquist, that's the name I was trying to. Paul Bloomquist had been the second commander of the first dust-off unit to go into Vietnam. And he was the aviator deer. He was shot, wounded 3 times. Guy was a real hero. He was Colonel Howlett's operations officer, and he followed me out. I didn't know the guy. I'd never met him, but he followed me out and said, did you mean everything you said? You really want to go back to Pleiku? Did I? And I said, yes, sir, I sure do. He said, well, I understand. And he would have, he would have understood that too. And like I said in my last one, about 2 hours later, I'm on my way to Pleiku because he talked Howlett out of it. I think Howlett had forgotten about that because it never came up when I was interviewing him. And so the rest of the story is that I wasn't there very long. The major who was commanding got what they call a drop. And this happened a lot for officers. If an officer was, let's say, a major, and he was supposed to be going to the next kind of course, well, then you had to they'd either be late joining the course or you give them a drop. That was pretty common. And so he got a drop, took off, and so I was in temporary command of this detachment. And by that time, Dick Scott was commanding at 498th, and Don Retzloff they're both good friends of mine, was his operations guy, and came to see me and look around, see what was going on. And he wanted to go to the PX. I had a Jeep. I got him in the Jeep, ruts and mud and everything else. I said, who are you going to send up here to command this detachment? Because, majors were in surplus. Lots of them had never commanded anything. He said, well, how about you? I think I've mentioned this, but I was flabbergasted. I said, you got to be kidding. You got majors that never commanded anything. You got them hanging all over the flying, like everybody else. That's not going to sit well with them. You're it. Well, I wasn't it very long. I was it about 2 months. And I was getting some stuff done. Oh, let me mention something before I get to that tragic moment. I had a young warrant officer who was we didn't have a position for a maintenance officer, but we always had a guy who was good, who had, for example, been a crew chief before he became a warrant officer and knew what he was doing. He was a real go-getter. And the Brits had come up with something called the DECA system. Okay, it's real simple. They put 3 beacons in Vietnam, South Vietnam. Each one of them with a different frequency. If you had the decoder on your aircraft, whatever it was, you could plot exactly where you were.
Triangulation.
Triangulation, that's right. And so this guy was, I tell you, he borrowed a helicopter for one day, went down to Saigon and got the tech rep for DECA, which was a British system, but we put it in, and the U.S. And he got the guy to come up and put it in, install the decoder, and a mapping system. It was a scroll map of your terrain, wherever you were, with a little stylus that would point to your exact location. And he and I went out a couple of times in weather and stuff like that with it. It really worked. When it said you were there, you were there. We differed on one thing, though. He claimed that was the thing to use for weather flying. I claimed that it was the best thing to use for knowing where you are and staying over roads, if possible. If something happens, you're a lot better off putting it down near a road than you are up a tree or something. So anyway, I went out on I had a standby crew with the 101st Airborne, and then a backup crew up there, and at the same time they were really getting into it heavy.
Well, this would have been Tet Offensive.
No, it was after the Tet. I missed the Tet Offensive.
Yeah.
I skipped that one.
What a shame. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty hectic, I guess.
But was it still 68?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got there, I think May or June of '68, and so I already had 2 aircraft out, so I went up because they had a backlog of requests for evacuation. So I went up, took the first one that came along, and they had what they called a C&C. One guy, usually a brigade commander or battalion commander in a Huey, just not flying it, but in it with a radio, directing traffic, shall we say. So I had the coordinates, I had the call sign and everything for this outfit that got in trouble. So I called this guy, the C&C, and I said, can I get gunships? He says, I can't get you any gunships right now. He says, I'm not real sure about the condition down there. He says, I know I got some wounded down there, but I don't know if it's really safe to go in yet. We don't want you shot down there too, and then we had to worry about you. And he didn't say that, but that's what they mean. So I waited a while, and finally called him again a couple times. And he said, well, it looks like it's okay to go in. They haven't had any contact for at least 30, 40 minutes, or if not longer, for sure. And I said, okay. So I called the guy on the ground. I said, dust off 26, blah, blah, blah. And asked him to throw out a smoke grenade. And when you did that, you didn't mention the color of the smoke. It was white and green and purple and blue, because that was my job, was to, I'd say, okay, I got purple smoke. Is that you? Yep, that's me. Because Charlie had all those.
Yeah.
He swiped them or took it
They knew ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if the guy said, I'm popping purple smoke, boy, you'd have purple smoke popping everywhere.
Yeah.
So I went in, and everything was hunky-dory. I found out later that when the guy had thrown the smoke grenade, he'd thrown it a little too hard, and it went rolling down the hill into some trees, or a grove of trees. Plenty of room for me to land or anything I had to do, and that's what I was doing. Well, I didn't know. I was flying right into the arms of Charlie. I don't know where the guy was, but I'm just trying to, I had it all leveled out and getting ready to put it down, and all of a sudden just my leg flew up, boom, like that. Didn't hurt. Flew up, the controls went left. We'd evidently gotten the hydraulics. We had 26 rounds. Pop, 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 right through the belly of that thing. I was the only one that got hit. And I wasn't hurt. I was able to get out. We wound up going over like this. The rotors dug into the bank, and we went upside down. And that's another feature of the Huey. That thing would survive just about anything. The engine was still running. The turbines were still running. I got out by one of the rounds that busted the chin bubble, that you could see through your feet to see if you're going to hit a rock or a stump or anything. So I crawled out that way, upside down, and crawled out. And I have pictures of all that kind of stuff, but didn't bring them with me. So we were all crawling up the bank to where it turned out that that's where these guys were, not where he'd thrown the smoke grenade. You weren't supposed to do that. You were supposed to pop it right where you were. Anyway, by that time it was around probably 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 maybe. I didn't get out of there until way after dark. We couldn't get in. And all of the that was 101st Airborne, yeah. All of their stuff was underground, bunkered, including their aid station, which is where they took me. And and I told you this before, but for some reason or other, they had little teams of officers running around trying to figure out, was everybody wearing their right safety gear, and were you doing this right, were you doing that right? These guys wanted to know if I had my chest protector. I said, yeah, I wore my chest protector. Did you use the wings on your seat? You could pull them forward. I said, yeah, I did that. On and on and on. I said, look, I don't feel so good. Come again another day. Meanwhile, they're cutting off my brand new Cochrane jump boots, which cost about $80 a pair. Brand new. Took my Webley revolver, which was my weapon that I had paid money for. I said, I want that back. I never got it. And then I was out for I don't know how long. What I didn't know was that I had been assigned a young warrant officer that wanted to transfer out of troop carrying to dust off. That's what he wanted to do. He'd been an aircraft commander. They were all young, pretty doggone young, so I flew with him a lot for a couple of weeks. And every time I had the duty, he went with me. He knew what he was doing. And then there was another warrant officer named R. Silverberg from Minnesota. Nicest young guy you ever want to see. When I woke up in Combat Support Hospital there at Playcoop, finally, all these guys are standing around me, and the first thing they start telling me is that this guy, Zymet was his name, had been killed the same day I got shot up. I couldn't take it. Well, it really bummed me out. Ooh, nice term. I was blubbering, for God's sake. And so they left. About a month after I left and was back here at Fort Sam at the hospital, Arvid Silverberg, sweet little guy, out on a hoist mission. We had hoists by that time. We didn't have them on my first tour at all. We had rubber plantations down in the slopes, on the slopes in the valleys, French rubber plantations, big old trees. And he had to go out there on a hoist mission. I don't know why in the world they were in that grove of trees, but they were. And they're sitting there hovering. They dropped the hook. And the hook, we had to drop a litter. And hell broke loose. They were shot up. R was killed. I didn't know that until a year ago.
Mm.
Somebody told me, I'm on this little email circle of guys that some of them I know, some of them I don't know, and they're passing information around. So sure enough, he's on the wall. You ever seen The Wall? You think that's inspiring? That black marble?
Inspiring is the word.
I hate that thing. I mean, the layout makes a lot of sense. It starts down here and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then here's the drawdown. But black, and all those people boo-hooing and blubbering. I mean, what's wrong with granite? I didn't like it. I went there twice, and people left little towels and Coke bottles full of flowers. And then there were all these guys hanging around their Harleys with their Band-Aid and bandanas around their heads, and they're wearing their old fatigues and everything. And, well, okay. But make a long story short, I stayed in that hospital almost 2 years. I was put before a physical evaluation board, and they recommended I go ahead and take my disability retirement. The only other option I had was to get into the supply business, which didn't thrill me a whole lot. I figured this is a good break point, Can't fly anymore. I don't want to be in supply. Good time to get out. I was a major by that time. So I got out, and
This would have been 70?
yeah, 70.
So you had how many years in now?
I had 16.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, one other little story. They have, I don't know if they still do it, but they have the Father of the Year ceremony around here in San Antonio. I think
The newspaper runs it, don't they?
I don't know who runs it. I had the impression it might have been some organization or other.
They could be.
Anyway, all of a sudden I'm the Military Father of the Year. And it was right out here. It was after, Hemisphere was 68.
Yeah.
This was 70. And turns out what they wanted was a guy that was in the hospital and had a family here.
Here in town.
Yeah. Well, that was me. A wounded veteran, and all that. So that was me. Military. Now, Father of the Year was an obstetrician, specialist in this and that. Had 70 kids, and 3 of them were adopted, and belonged to the Elks and the Eagles and the, everything. And he's the Father of the Year, just because I got shot and I got a couple of kids. It was right out here. They put up a little stand and everything. And what got me was that this young soldier in the crowd came up. Still brings tears to my eyes a little bit. Because that was a bad time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The drawdown, well, it was rough.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Okay, I'm pretty much done, I think.
You want to cut it off?
Yeah.
We can do that. Good timing.